Hello everyone, this is Chris again. Welcome to this Halloween special, just one day before Halloween. And I wanted to talk about my last appearance on the JeffMara Podcast. Guess I got to talk about a few experiences that are actually quite spooky, but I only had 10 minutes, so I didn't really have the chance to talk about them in that much detail. And since Halloween is coming up tomorrow, actually, I wanted to talk about some spooky experiences I've had when I was outside my body. And so I mentioned this on the JeffMara Podcast. But basically, this was a few months after my Kundalini Awakening. And as you know, I was visited by this goddess called the Queen of Heaven, or Inanna, who is a very benevolent and loving entity. She's basically a being of light, even though she does have a reputation of being a warrior goddess. But if you understand the symbology and mythology behind it, especially with her descendants like Aphrodite or Venus, or in India, the goddess Durga, then you understand that this warrior aspect actually has to do with fighting evil and defeating evil, fighting demons even, which is very explicit with the goddess Durga, for instance. So it's an important thing to keep in mind, because being of the light, being good, being benevolent, being of service to others, this isn't just about sitting on a mountaintop and meditating. That's not enough. It's also about fighting evil. And that is an unfortunate reality that we have to face, that we are not alone in this universe. There are many other life forms, and some are parasitic, and some are even malevolent. So I don't know where to put this encounter I've had. I don't want to make any judgments. I leave that to you. So I'll just tell it to you the way it happened, and you will be the judge whether this counts as a scary or spooky encounter. I personally wasn't scared, but I guess to some people this might sound scary, looking at popular culture and depictions of such entities in, horror movies, for instance. So I got interested in various post-biblical accounts, or even apocryphal accounts, as they are called, especially the Book of Enoch, when it comes to different biblical writings. And the Book of Enoch mentions a group of angels known as the Watchers, that were basically fallen angels that came down to earth to teach humanity originally. They were supposedly responsible for teaching different things, giving gifts of civilization to humans. And we actually know the names of most of these watchers, but I'm not going to mention it for a reason I will mention later. And so one of these entities, one of the leaders of the watchers that is mentioned in the Book of Enoch, a few months after my Kundalini Awakening, he started coming to me. And he had a very different vibration or energy to Inanna. I would describe it as sort of orange-red, fiery. So he definitely had the element of fire within him. And later on, I actually discovered that the Muslims believe that the jinn, for instance, which is probably a different category, but an additional category that this being might belong to. So I don't know, but it certainly seemed to me that he had the element of fire in him. That was his main element, which the Muslims would say is the hallmark of a jinn. But so he started coming to me, and I didn't really know who he was in the beginning, but I gradually learned that he was one of the watchers, and he presented himself as this sort of benevolent being that would teach me about different things. He would teach me how to use my power, which he said would be to use it as a weapon, basically. So he pointed to my gut chakra, the solar plexus, as it's called, and he instructed me that I should start training it and try to use it as a weapon, and to learn how to destroy my enemies, which were his enemies, according to him. And so I didn't really like this kind of attitude, but I thought I should listen. And, he came to me a few times. But one time we had this difficulty communicating. And I really had a great deal of trouble understanding him or what he wanted. And I was sort of arguing with him. And these conversations, of course, they happen in the mind. It's telepathic, but there's also a presence. So when an entity like this comes to you, you can feel them, pretty much touching you, like they might touch your shoulder or your knee or something. So they are there invisibly as a form of energy, I would say. And so this entity came to me and we had trouble communicating. And I think he got frustrated. So I was sitting in my flat in London, cross-legged, meditating. And I suddenly found myself outside my body. I wasn't in my body anymore. I was actually floating. So this is very similar to my near-death experience, which probably happened after this. And also to my Kundalini experience when I was outside my body, but more similar to my NDE when I was basically outside in an almost physical form, so in my astral form, you could say. So I found myself outside my body in my astral form, floating around, and I couldn't really move, but I was in a cave. So there was a huge cavern, and it was sort of dimly lit. So it had some sort of natural lighting, which was actually quite pleasant. So it didn't look terrifying or scary or anything like that. And so I was just floating, but I felt quite helpless and weightless. So I started flailing my arms around a little bit and tried to turn around. And I managed to turn 180 degrees because I could only see this cave. And as I turned around, I saw this being who later I learned is a fallen angel watcher. And I was very surprised. He was huge, much bigger than I am in my current form. And he sat cross-legged on a sort of ledge on the floor, on the rocks. There wasn't much around him. I think there might have been like an animal skin beneath him, if I remember correctly. And he was completely alone in this cave, which was dimly lit, but not entirely dark. It had a sort of fiery appearance, so maybe there was some sort of lava or something that gave this fiery glow. I'm not sure where the light came from. And so I looked at him. I think if he stood up, he probably would have been twice as tall as me. So, probably like 12 feet, something like that. So that's like 3 meters, 60 centimeters, something around that size. But I saw him sitting, so I can't really say. And so as I looked at him, he looked like chimera, as it's called, or a goatman, as was actually mentioned by somebody else on the JeffMara podcast. So he was half human, half goat. His body was entirely covered in hair, in this sort of dark brown, I would say, dark brown hair, fur. And so he had the head of a goat and long horns that went up like, probably they went backwards, if I remember correctly. It's kind of hard to recall after all these years. And he had very intelligent eyes. I would say his eyes were quite human. And the interesting thing is that he was blinking. So when I looked into his eyes, and I blinked in my astral form, and he always blinked at exactly the same time I blinked. So this indicated to me that we were actually in some sort of telepathic connection, that he was linked to me. That so basically he was partially controlling my movements, and I was also controlling his. So we had this link, this telepathic link. And I was very surprised to see that, but I wasn't scared, just very, very surprised. And the interesting thing is that he was also surprised, because I think he didn't expect me to show up in this underworld realm, which I will talk about a bit later. Because I think I know what it is, but nobody can say for sure, but I have some thoughts about it. So I was there floating around. We were both surprised. He looked a little bit impressed that I sort of showed up astrally in his cave, you could say, in his abode. And that was really it. So he just basically let me go, and I found myself back in my body. But the interesting thing is that when I was there, so this is a form of astral projection, I could say. Although I didn't really do it myself. It was involuntary, or I don't know if he caused it or whether it was actually me. It's kind of hard to say. But in any case, that was the last time I actually saw him. He came to me in an energetic form a few more times after that. But I mean, I wasn't judging him. I wasn't prejudging him based on, what you would read in different writings about these beings. But I didn't like his attitude to some things. I found him to be adversarial and, quite bitter towards different groups of people. And even I would say the denizens of heaven, heavenly beings, because you should know that there is a ritual connected to this being, which is called the scapegoat ritual. This is done every year in Israel, in the deserts of Israel, where the sins of the Jewish people are transferred to this entity in a ritual. And so he's the scapegoat, and it's not very fond of this ritual or the people that do it. And I think for this reason, you will find that people who are involved with these entities, this sort of fallen angels, rebel angels, they are not particularly fond of Jews usually. And I think that's not a coincidence. So there is probably a lot of darkness behind this that I don't really know about, but I've seen some of it because I used to participate in forums that were of an occult nature. So a famous one is Become a Living God, which is E.A. Cutting's forum, who is a black magician, a Satanist basically. And there's actually a huge news story in the UK that came out this week about a member on this forum who actually murdered 2 women in London, hoping to win the lottery. And he chose one of these supposedly foreign entities, and he offered blood sacrifices to him, which I personally don't think that this would ever work. I think it's a hoax, to be honest. But that's what he did, you know. I'm not blaming the entities themselves if they were offered these sacrifices. But I think some people, they really believe that if they offer blood, if they murder someone, then they're going to win huge riches and fame and power and that sort of thing. And allegedly, I don't know this, but there are rumors that Halloween is actually the night when a lot of these rituals take place. So I don't know if it's true, but certainly we see some news stories that come out, and that would indicate that this sort of thing really happens. So I don't know that much about it, to be honest. I was never interested in gaining fame and fortune and money or power or any of those things. I think they're completely, they are just irrelevant, you know, they don't matter. Because if you are connected to spirit, if you have this connection to heaven, then you just don't need it, because this material life doesn't really matter to you. So you need the basics to be taken care of, you know. You need food, shelter, healthcare, accommodation, that sort of thing. But essentially, your task here is to concentrate on your spiritual journey, to spread the love, to spread this light that comes from heaven, and that you can transfer through your heart. So it's actually in your heart always, but you can transfer it in many different ways. So either you do it heart to heart, just when we hug. So that's why it's so important to hug the people you love, because when you do that, then your hearts actually connect energetically. There are these strings which are called gunas in Sanskrit that link the hearts together, and they're like little interdimensional energetic gateways that carry energy. And so they link our hearts together. And when you hug someone, you actually create this energetic link, and there is an exchange of energy, which is very important. But then also when you look at the hand, it's actually also responsible for transferring this energy to others. And so this is what healers use, or priests use it when they bless someone. Because from the heart center here, there are direct energetic channels that go to the arms, and then they exit over here. This is a very important exit point, just around here. And then also one here. And then the different fingers, they also have exit points. So when you use your hands to touch someone, you just show your hands towards them, then they're going to feel this light and love. That can come from you, of course. You are the source of it. But in many ways, you are also the conduit. So you transfer this light, you channel this light to others. And so that is the light of heaven, the love of heaven. So it's very important to have this in your heart and to transfer it to others and to share the love with others. Because that's the only way we can make the world a better place. And so humans, we are actually good at heart. I know it's hard to believe when you look at the world and what it has become, because there are a lot of people that are psychopathic and they run the world more or less, but most of us are not psychopaths, It's like maybe 4% of the population, and it's mostly men. And so the vast majority of men and almost all women are not psychopaths, We are not evil. We are good. So we have goodness in our hearts. And we can transfer this goodness, this benevolence, this selflessness. We can make the lives of other people better just by being there for them and listening to them and helping them out in any way we can, in whatever small way we can. Sometimes all people need is just for you to be there. They just need your presence and your love, your attention. So if you are there for them, and if you surround yourself with this white light, with this love, nobody can touch you. So some people think these entities, these fallen entities, they are dangerous, or they can destroy your life, or they can oppress you, they can possess you. But it's only if you let them. So if you choose heaven, if you allow the power of heaven to come into you, if you transmit the light of the gods, the light of the denizens of heaven, then nothing can touch you. And the people that you actually bless with your light, they will be the same way. So they cannot be hurt. They cannot be hijacked. They cannot be possessed. And by your mere presence, you can exclude evil from that small section of the world, that small part of the world that you inhabit and that you touch with your own energy field, which is the people around you, people you interact with every day. So what you can really do is to do your own small part and to help people out. So the other topic that came up during the JeffMara podcast was actually about Kundalini again. And Jeff asked me whether I thought that raising Kundalini was a good idea, whether this was something I would recommend to others, whether they should do that. And I said no. So which might be surprising, but Kundalini is really not for everyone. So it's a path that some people might want to take. It's something that you might benefit from, but it's not for everyone because it's a difficult path, and it contains a lot of sacrifices, and you have to give up a lot. So it's not something that most people would be ready to do. I think you have to be very mature spiritually and mentally. You have to be prepared to give up everything. And I mean that quite literally. So if you aren't prepared to give up everything you have, everything you own, including friends and family, you should not go into the field of Kundalini. And it doesn't mean that you will have to give all of this up, but you might lose some of it, and you have to let it go. And you have to be okay with losing everything. Because what you lose in terms of your material bonds, and some of these are quite painful because they might include the people you love. But these are all material bonds. And so what you will lose in the material and physical world, you will gain 1,000-fold in the spiritual realm. And so you will experience spiritual ecstasy and joy and just immense happiness on a scale that's just impossible in physical reality and in a physical body, basically. So your entire soul-body construct will start to morph and change and gradually become more spiritual. So there is a process that's actually explained by Gopi Krishna, a well-known author on Kundalini. So once Kundalini has risen to the top of the head, and if it stays there long enough, eventually you will get this download of higher dimensional light that will come down to you pretty much on a constant basis. And so this is known as Soma or Amrita in Sanskrit, and the Greeks knew it as nectar or ambrosia. It's the food of the gods. And it's a higher dimensional liquid light that flows down, more like drips down into your brain through the pineal gland. You can actually feel this. And there are some methods in yoga which actually try to artificially stimulate the excretion of this nectar, which is called Kechari Mudra, for instance, which is about pressing the tongue against the palate and then pushing it back further and further until it's essentially in your throat, which I wouldn't recommend because you don't need it, you know. If you are meant to raise Kundalini, then it will just rise on its own without you really trying. So you just have to let the process happen. This actually happens to a lot of spiritual people in different religions. They just probably don't realize it or don't pay that much attention to it. But the Kundalini Awakening process, it happens to people all over the world when they open themselves up to spirit, to higher power, this greater reality, and they allow the nectar of heaven to flow into them. And this happens to everyone. So these are the people that we call enlightened or illuminated. Usually they are depicted with a halo around their head. And it's because of this nectar that drips into their brain, and it gives them this slightly shining countenance, which people who are quite sensitive, like artists, painters, would actually notice it. And I remember the first time I saw someone like that was in a Mormon church in Cork in Ireland. And there was this guy who recently became a Mormon, even though he was Irish. He was a Roman Catholic. And he told me that when he accepted the religion, he accepted the Holy Spirit into his body, basically. And he was lifted up by the Holy Spirit, so he actually floated, which is something I had never seen, but I have no doubts that he was telling the truth, at least from his perception. But I think it's possible that maybe it was just his astral body that was lifted, and he felt like it was his physical body that was floating. I cannot say, but because he was alone, there wasn't anybody to witness it, so we don't know. But in any case, he felt himself being lifted up by the Holy Spirit. And so later, when I saw him speak about spiritual matters, and he was standing against a white background, I saw this sheen around his head, like an aura. So it's just like a halo, basically. And then I actually realized this is a real thing. So people who have been touched by the divine, by the Holy Spirit, by Shakti, which is also a form, well, Kundalini is a form of Shakti. It's a localized form. But it's, it's the power of heaven. It's the divine feminine. It's the creative force of God, whatever name you want to give it. And it's used in Reiki, in different forms of energy healing. So we're all talking about the same thing, but this thing exists in everyone, and it's crucial that we learn to channel it in whatever form we can. So Kundalini is one way to do it, but there are other ways as well. And I talked a little bit about shielding before, so this white light protection, which anybody can learn to do. It's quite a simple method, actually. So you can create this shield of white light around you, and there are different breathing and imagination techniques that can help you achieve that. There's actually a more advanced version that I used once, and it was against this same entity, whose name I'm not going to mention because I want to protect you. You should not say the names of such entities out loud. It's an important lesson to learn. And so this particular entity came to me years after this encounter, and he was sort of nice. He wanted to see if he could recruit me to his cause once again, or for the first time, to be honest. But he wanted to try again because I didn't really bite the first time, and I didn't like his approach. And I caught him in a few lies, so I said, "Okay, go away with you." And he didn't really want to go away. He sort of wanted to embrace me in his own energy, and I didn't like it, so I raised my Kundalini and I generated this fire around me. So it's similar to this white light protection, but Kundalini is a lot more potent and it's fiery and it burns. So I actually realized that by raising this fire, this shield of fire around me, I can drive him away. And I think it took me around 2 hours. So for 2 hours, I raised my Kundalini and I extended this fire and made it bigger and bigger and stronger and hotter until he basically gave up and just left me alone. Then after that, he didn't come back. And so if you learn to raise your Kundalini, then this is a method you can actually use to keep away entities that you don't want to contact, or you don't want these entities to come into your life. And this is important because once you reach some level of enlightenment, you could say, your Kundalini lights up and you shine like a beacon in the astral world. And so all these different entities, especially from the lower astral, they will come and approach you and try to talk you into doing different things and influence you and try to use you for their own purposes. That is unfortunately how it goes. So if you learn to use this method of creating fire, a shield of fire against you, then nobody can touch you. And even the white light method is quite effective because it will keep away almost any parasite or entity that might want to attach itself to you. So it's important to learn these things. It's a sort of spiritual self-defense. And in today's world, it's quite important, I think, to learn these things and to make sure that you know how to do it. And the reason I wanted to talk about this a bit more, especially around Halloween, is because of this realm that I saw when I saw this particular fallen angel. It was underground. I'm pretty sure it was on this planet, so it was beneath our feet, quite literally. But it was also shifted into another dimension or a parallel reality, you could say. So it wasn't in our reality, but physically speaking, it was beneath our feet, which is, I know it's difficult to comprehend, but there is some sort of dimensional shift that takes place as you go towards the center of the earth. And I don't understand this, but if you think about Dante's this description of hell, which is another Christian word for the underworld, you could say, then he talks about these different circles, I think 9 circles of hell. And so as you go towards the center of the earth, if you went there physically, of course you wouldn't see anything. But because you are in the astral, different reality, a parallel reality or a different dimension, then you actually experience a completely different reality as you go towards the center of the earth. And so there is an entire universe, I would say, that is inside the planet. Some people call it inner earth, which I don't think is an accurate description, because it's not like a hollow earth sort of thing, but more like caves and caverns that exist deep below the surface of the earth. But if you went there in a physical form, you wouldn't see anything. So they would be completely devoid of life. But if you go there astrally, it's a different story. Then you're going to see quite incredible things in there. And so this underworld and I don't like to use the word hell because, there is a sort of hellish circle dimension within it, where you have demons that actually supposedly punish the soul of the dead. I don't know if that's true. I haven't actually seen anything like that, but I cannot actually exclude it because it's described in so many different mythologies and religions. The Sumerians talk about it. They call it Kor, which is Kur, which is where they have these Gala demons who are commanded by the queen of the underworld, Ereshkigal, who is the queen of the dead, the queen of the night, who actually drag the souls of the dead into the underworld, and if they have been sinful or evil in their life, then they will be punished. So it's a very similar concept to what exists in Christianity and Islam, and even Hinduism and Buddhism. So you find this sort of idea everywhere, but I cannot tell you if it's true or not. I haven't seen it. All I know is that the underworld itself is real, and there are beings down there, astral beings that we cannot see with our normal senses, but that are quite powerful, and possibly they exist in this dimensional prison. I wouldn't be surprised if that were proven to be the case, but again, I'm just speculating here. But so this underworld realm is described by the Hindus. For instance, in the Mahabharata, Arjuna goes down there, and there are these watery worlds below the surface where the Nagas live, who are like half snake, half human beings. And then they have different magical creatures, and he actually marries one of them, and they have children. I think they have a son together who comes to his aid later on during a war. But actually, these underworld creatures in Hinduism, they are usually described as benevolent, so quite wise and benevolent creatures with a high culture and very advanced capabilities, so almost like demigods, you could say. So I don't believe that all the creatures in the underworld are actually evil, like they are depicted in Christianity. But there are some that would be, and I think that a place of punishment probably does exist in the underworld. But I cannot say for certain how it is. I'm just referring to myths and the very limited direct experience I've had, which is the one I told you about. That's all. So that's the very tiny piece of information I can contribute on my own, and the rest I just have to rely on myths and different religious texts. So that's what I have to rely on. So this is what I think the underworld is, and that's all I can say about it. But with Halloween coming up, I think it's important to keep this in mind and to have this knowledge. And actually, I would like to recommend a few TV shows that make some pretty good depictions of what we could be dealing with. And one of them is the new Sabrina series, which is a sort of satanic reimagination of the original Sabrina the Teenage Witch series, which was a pretty good and funny show back in the 90s. I remember it very well. And so in this series, the Lord of Night, I think he's called, Satan basically, he's this Baphomet-like figure with this goat head, basically. And he looks quite similar to what I saw myself. And this sort of figure, I think in the JeffMara podcast, Jeff asked me if he could have been the Roman god Pan, who's also known as a faun by the Greeks, who's also a similar sort of goat-headed figure, but definitely not an evil one. It's more like a sort of playful spirit. And I think it's possible, yes. I don't necessarily believe that, any underworld being you might come across is going to be evil. Could be, could be not. It depends. They have good and bad spirits, I would say, even in the underworld, and you have to make an individual judgment to decide whether that particular spirit is malevolent or benevolent. So I don't want to make a judgment about that before I know the situation, So I would like to keep an open mind. But certainly the faun, as it appears in mythology, and also this Guillermo del Toro movie, which is a very good one. It's called Panz Labyrinth, which I would recommend. It's a great movie. It's a sort of mystical, semi-horror movie about this little girl in Franco's fascist Spain, who lives in a very dark world, surrounded by fascist soldiers and murders and executions and whatnot. And she comes across this ancient labyrinth where she sees this Pan-like creature, this faun, that gives her different tasks to complete. And it's quite an important or interesting movie, I would say. And then the third movie / TV show I would recommend is actually Buffy, the Vampire Slayer, which I also enjoyed very much when I was younger. It's also from the 1990s. And some of it is quite silly, and it has pretty bad special effects, but excellent writing, I would say, and very good acting. And it's about this girl who fights evil. She's almost like a demigod because she has superhuman strength and sort of visions and powers that she can use. And then later on there are witches in it and whatnot. But it also depicts these underworld entities, demons as they are called in the show, that are sort of half human, half animal. They have different animal heads and horns and whatnot. And as the show progresses, it actually becomes more and more important. And whilst at the beginning it shows them as these evil, dark entities, and then later on it becomes obvious that that's not necessarily always the case, because they're more like shades of gray. So some of them become actually quite sympathetic or even central to the story. And I think it's important to note that we're not alone. There are so many different forms of life surrounding us that we just ignore to our peril, I would say. So we have to be aware of other forms of life, intelligent life, some of whom are more intelligent than we are, and they have more power. And so it's important to discern whether something is benevolent or malevolent, and to have your heart in the right place, and to use white light protection, or if you can use the fire of Kundalini to create a shield around you, that's even better, to make sure that you are not approached by malevolent beings, and that you keep to beings of the true light. because they can help you. And it doesn't matter what religion you follow, because we give different names to these beings of light. I mean, we give different names to these beings. Deva, as they are called in Sanskrit. So they would be the ones in Hinduism and Buddhism. We would call them gods, deus, probably, in Western culture. So from Greeks to Romans, all the way to Christianity and Judaism, and even Islam. And then within Egyptian and Sumerian culture, you also have different names that you can give them. I talked about the Anunnaki, who are the basis of the Elohim in the Bible, to the best of my knowledge. But these are all different names for beings of light. Christians might differentiate and say that there are angels, but angels are messengers of heaven. So they are heavenly beings as well, just like the Elohim or the Anunnaki or the Devas. So they are all beings of heaven, beings of light. But there might be different categories of them, different pantheons. So I'm not saying that all of the beings in all of these different pantheons all over the world are the same. I don't actually think so, because from what I have seen, this dark fallen entity was definitely from the Jewish pantheon or Judeo-Christian, Islamic pantheon, I would say. And it's not something that you would come across in the Hindu or Buddhist pantheons or the Sumerian pantheon, for instance. So I think there's definitely a differentiation between different pantheons, but they also influence each other. So we don't really understand how this works. I'm not going to pretend that I know, but it's just important to keep this in mind. And so if you can connect to heaven and to heavenly beings, you can receive the blessings of heaven. So it will flow down into you, basically as a cloud or as a stream of cleansing water, this white liquid light that you can pass on to others. So this healing energy, you can actually transfer it to others. So this is something that you can give to others, and you can heal their problems and their pain, their trauma. So if you receive this gift from heaven, I think you should make sure that you pass it on, especially in physical reality. So when you are around people, and if you can touch them with this energy, with this light, then you should do everything in your power to pass it on to them. So that's what you should do, just in my opinion. So thanks for watching. I would like to wrap this one up. This was actually a bit longer than I anticipated, but I had to get a few things off my chest. And I will link the JeffMara episode with a timestamp in the description below. If you have any questions, then please go ahead and ask them in the comments, and I will try to reply to them. I can maybe make a follow-up video as well if you're interested. And if you haven't subscribed yet, then please do, because more videos will be coming up regularly. Thanks very much.